Welcome back. Here we go with today's astounding anecdote. Alright, so picture this. I'm sitting in my office, right? It's late. The year is 2025, but the case I'm on is centuries old. It's a cold case. The coldest, thick file, dusty, title, The Origins of American Slavery. But here's the thing. The real story is buried under layers of, he said, she said. And let's just not talk about it. People will tell you, oh, it just happened? Happened? No. Murder doesn't just happen. A 7-car pileup doesn't just happen. And a system of brutal, generational, race-based chattel slavery definitely doesn't just fall out of the sky. Someone, somewhere made a choice. And then another and another. My job is to find out who and why. This isn't your high school history class, where the teacher wants you to memorize a date and move on. Our investigation begins in the early 1600s. The location? A little place called Virginia. Now, Virginia wasn't a state yet. It was more like a startup company with a really bad business plan. The company was called the Virginia Company of London, and its investors were a bunch of rich guys in England who had heard the Americas were basically a giant ATM. They were promised gold, silver, a shortcut to China. You know, reasonable expectations. Instead, their employees, the colonists, found mostly mosquitoes, starvation, very confused Native Americans watching pale, overdressed men. It was a disaster. The get-rich-quick scheme was turning into a die slowly and miserably reality. This is our first clue, desperation. The colonists were failing. They couldn't find gold. They were terrible at farming. They were basically the fire festival of colonial settlements. They needed a new plan, a new product, a new way to make their investors in London happy. And that's when they stumbled upon a miracle crop, tobacco. This stuff was like the 17th century equivalent of cryptocurrency. It was addictive. Everyone in Europe wanted it. Every good mystery needs a lineup of suspects. This case has some real characters. Let's bring them in one by one. First up, suspect number 1, the Spanish, the Portuguese. Now, these guys are the OGs of the Atlantic slave trade. They had been running a massive, horrifyingly efficient operation for over a century before the English even landed at Jamestown. They had set up a whole system, the Asiento de Negros. Next in our lineup, suspect number 2, the English colonists themselves. These are the guys on the ground in Virginia, desperate for labor. At first, they tried using indentured servants, usually 4 to 7 years. It was a tough gig, but there was a light at the end of the tunnel. Freedom. Then we have suspect number 3, the African kings and merchants. Now this is where things get complicated and people get uncomfortable, and traders participated in the transatlantic slave trade. While their involvement is part of the story, it's like blaming the guy who sold the getaway car for the bank robbery. Finally, let's not forget suspect number 4, the idea. The idea in question is the concept of racial hierarchy. As the demand for permanent cheap labor grew, a powerful and poisonous idea began to take shape. This idea is the silent partner in the crime, the one whispering in everyone's ear that what they're doing is okay. Now, let's talk about the alibis. Every suspect has one, and they always sound perfectly reasonable until you poke a few holes in them. The colonists' main alibi was economics. It wasn't personal, they'd say, shrugging in their powdered wigs. It was just business. We had to do it to survive. The tobacco wasn't going to pick itself. This is the classic defense of a corner cutter. It's like a restaurant owner saying, look, I know there were rats in the kitchen, but have you seen the profit margins on this soup? We had to save money somewhere. They acted as if slavery was an unfortunate but necessary byproduct of their noble pursuit of prosperity. They claimed they were bringing civilization and Christianity to the heathen Africans. Oh, how noble! It was a humanitarian mission, you see. They were saving souls, chaining them in the bowels of a ship for months and then forcing them to work until they died was just an unfortunate part of the process. It's an alibi so thin you can see right through it. It's like a burglar telling the police he only broke into your house to tell you about a great new home security system he's selling. The justification doesn't quite match the crime, does it? The case gets more complex as we follow the trail of evidence. a series of laws and court cases that act like breadcrumbs leading us straight to the heart of the crime. In the early days, the line between an indentured servant and an enslaved person was blurry. Some Africans who were brought over worked for a term and then gained their freedom, just like white indentured servants. We have records of free black landowners in 17th century Virginia. But then, things started to change. The first major twist comes in 1640 with the case of John Punch. Punch was an African indentured servant who ran away with two white indentured servants. They were all caught. The two white servants had their terms of service extended by a few years. But John Punch, the court sentenced him to servitude for the rest of his natural life. This was it. This was one of the first documented cases where a court in Virginia made a legal distinction based on race, handing down a lifetime sentence to the black man while giving the white man a slap on the wrist. This wasn't a law yet, but it was a precedent. Every detective story has that moment, the moment the key piece of evidence, the smoking gun, is finally revealed. For our case, that moment happens in late August 1619. The place is Point Comfort, Virginia. A ship appears on the horizon. It's not an English ship, it's a privateer vessel called the White Lion. Privateers were basically legal pirates, sanctioned by one government to raid the ships of another. This ship had recently attacked a Portuguese slave ship, the São João Bautista, which was on its way to Mexico, packed with captured Africans from the kingdom of Ndongo in modern-day Angola. The White Lion had stolen some of its cargo, and now it had arrived in Virginia looking to trade. The ship's captain, John Job, traded his stolen human beings for food and supplies. The official record, written by the colony's secretary, John Rolfe, yes, the same guy who married Pocahontas, noted the arrival of 20 and odd Negroes. This is it. This is the moment everyone points to. The arrival of the first documented Africans in English North America. It's often taught as the beginning of slavery, but as we've seen, it's more complicated than that. So, after all the clues, the suspects, and the red herrings, what's the big reveal? Who really started slavery in America? The answer is everyone. It wasn't a single villain in a dark room cackling as they drew up a master plan. It was a slow, creeping crime committed by a whole society, a conspiracy of convenience and greed. The Portuguese, the Spanish, the African traders, the English investors, the desperate colonists, the lawyers and politicians. The real crime wasn't just the act of enslaving people. The real, deep, foundational crime was the creation of a system that made it profitable and legal. The big reveal is that American slavery wasn't an accident or an unfortunate chapter. It was a choice, a series of thousands of choices made every day by people who chose profit over humanity. Slavery wasn't a bug in the American system. It was a feature from the start. This contradiction is the central mystery of American history. The country's DNA was spliced with this poison from the very beginning, was extracted from the blood, sweat, and tears of enslaved Africans and their descendants. The system wasn't just rigged against them, the system was the rig. After all the clues, motives, and choices, what do we truly learn from this story? The history of slavery in America is not just a record of villains and victims, it's a tapestry woven from millions of decisions. Each choice, each action shaped the world we live in today. The legacy of that past still echoes in our laws, our institutions, and our daily lives. But history is not just a shadow behind us, it's a mirror showing us how far we've come and how far we still have to go. If we face the truth with honesty and courage, we can plant new seeds of justice, compassion, and understanding. The story of America is still being written by each of us every day. The future depends on the choices we make now. Thank you so much for subscribing and watching. See you soon with another astounding anecdote.